Holly was a gorgeous older woman I had met during a New Year's Eve party. She was 3 years older than me at 28, and a mutual friend introduced us. It wasn't like those awkward first meet where you hug your drink to your chest or shuffle around. Holly immediately went to ask if I had accomplished anything in my previous year's revolution. And it sounded like she actually gave two craps. She wasn't just asking for asking's sake. Believe it or not, we kissed on the first night when the clock hit 12. I expected it for the most part. We spent the entire night together, grabbing drinks and dancing. I know it sounds like a cheese end to a rom-com, but just imagine how surreal it felt for me. I had been single for the past 2 years of my life, and dating was only becoming harder. From there, she kind of just led things between us. She called me first for the first date, which was at her apartment. And I think from that night, we just decided that we wanted to be with each other. Holly being 4 years older then wasn't as big of a deal to me as everyone else. I liked it. She took the reins in our relationship whilst I sat back and agreed. Her sense of dominance also found its way into our bedroom, and it turned out that I was definitely into it. I was having the time of my life. My parents didn't agree with our relationship at all, mainly because of her age. 4 years didn't seem like a big age gap to me, but they called her a cougar. For that reason, I didn't introduce her to them. And thankfully, she never seemed too interested in meeting them either, although that should have been a red flag. They also didn't like her because of the way she treated me, which again I wouldn't say was bad, but she had this assertiveness to her, and my parents were stuck in their traditional gender roles. On the other hand, I wasn't some toxic hyper-masculine male. Holly wanted to be the leader, and I got to live life on a cloud. I didn't see the issue. My parents had no choice but to respect my choice. I was an adult. I think the only thing that gave them peace of mind was the fact that we didn't live together. Holly always advised against it and wanted to consider marriage first. So at 25, I got my own apartment, and like always, she got everything in place for me. All I had to do was sign the lease and make the payments. Everything at that point felt surreal. I had a job at a good company in tech and an older girlfriend who knew what she wanted and wasn't running around like the other women. Holly seemed to like our dynamic as well, although she always reminded me that her independence was important to her. And that was one of the main reasons why we didn't share an apartment together even after 3 years together. She liked that she still had somewhat of a sense of freedom, and that I still had my space, and I agreed for the most part. We didn't start having any problems until I noticed that Holly began going out a lot more. I didn't have a problem with it, but she went out without me and left her phone off at all hours in the evening. I could have just been overthinking, but every time I brought it up to her, Holly reminded me that she didn't want her freedom to be taken away from her, nor did she want to feel as if she was in a cage. And apparently, that's how I was making her feel. I didn't want to lose that we had, so naturally I decided that I was just in my head and being an overbearing boyfriend. Her wanting to live her life freely must have come with the territory of having an older girlfriend, so I had to continue giving her the space to do so. Holly also managed to convince me that I didn't have enough of a social life. And that's why I was so focused on her life. I also considered going out a bit more, but it wasn't as satisfying as she made it seem. Anyways, fast forward to the inciting incident. I felt bad for making her feel trapped, so I decided to host a date night at my house as a sort of apology. Holly wasn't a secretive person, but she did like more sentimental things. And that included a lot of date nights at home. Or in secluded areas. That's how I knew she'd like this idea. She decided that she'd spend the night over, but once I started cooking, her phone started ringing, and it wouldn't stop. I asked her about it, and she said that it was just her boss who needed her to upload a few files. And that she'd do it later. I took her words at face value and moved on with my night. We ate dinner together, but I could tell that she was distracted that entire night. She flipped her phone over and put it on silent, but it would still buzz with text messages. She told me to ignore it. But I had this uneasy feeling that only grew as the minutes passed. Finally, towards the end of the night, she decided that she would upload those files that her boss had been pestering her for, only to find out she left them in the vehicle. She went downstairs to get it, and I found myself doing something I thought I would never do. I grabbed her phone, and yes, I read some of the text messages from her boss, but they were fine, and he hadn't messaged asking for any files that night. I did find it strange that he would just randomly ask her to upload documents, and that only added to my apprehension. There were, however, text messages from a colleague of hers I had met some while ago. I contemplated putting the phone down to stop pushing my luck, but the fact that she lied about it made it impossible to. I figured I was already on the phone, so I locked the door, ensuring that she'd have no choice but to knock when she came back up. With nothing left to do, I went through their messages, and what I saw made my stomach sink. Their chat was littered with dirty pictures and meet updates and load updates and locations that she didn't even try to hide. I scrolled endlessly. The messages never seemed to end. They started their arrangement before we even got together 3 years ago. What made it even worse was that my girlfriend seemed to want a relationship with his guy, but he didn't want one with her. So it wasn't even that she cheated on me, it was as if I was just some placeholder. I got second-hand embarrassment whilst also feeling humiliated. Holly had been after a guy who was treating her like a toothbrush, and the entire time I was there being somewhat her plaything. I took pictures almost on instinct, as if to get irrefutable proof if she decided to lie. Even then, I didn't have the chance to process everything before she tried to unlock the door. I shoved her phone back in place as she knocked, and her confused face was waiting on me the moment I opened the door. She asked if I had locked it, to which I said denied, brushing off that it must have been knocked into place when she closed it. She didn't question my answer because in her eyes, there was no reason to. The entire time, on the other hand, I was trying not to lose it. She continued to act with me as if nothing was going on. She even went on to pretend to upload those stupid files, even though I knew that there was nothing to upload, and even went as far as to describe what was on them. I didn't know if I should have thrown it in her face or just asked her to leave. I figured after a while that it was only one night. I didn't want her to continuously question why I wanted her to leave, nor was I in the mood to confront her just to go on and on whilst she probably tried to spin the truth. I was so angry that I feared I'd do something that I'd regret if I brought it up at that moment. I let her stay over, complaining about having a stomach ache to get out of engaging in any other activities for the night. We went to sleep, and I woke up early and texted her that I was going to the gym and that I'd see her later. I did in fact go for a run to clear my head, but all I could think of was how I was some sort of rebound for 3 years. I imagined what she did, what that man when I wasn't around. Although I didn't much have to. She described it quite vividly in their messages. Everyone around me was right, and I defended her all those years like a blind fool. Sometimes she knew that I'd stuck up for her, even when she wasn't around. She'd listen to me tell her how I didn't let anyone around me disrespect what we had, and she'd bask in the fact that I was all for her. Yet she was up under another man the entire time that I had my heart on the line. It was embarrassing to think of, but I would have to go back to my parents and tell them exactly what happened. Just to hear, "I told you so." My friends would probably laugh too, knowing that they warned me continuously about her, and the way she conducted herself, and I'd have no choice but to take it. I decided that if I have to go through all of that, then I would have to humiliate her just as badly. I'm not sure how the plan exactly occurred to me, but Holly and I have spoken about marriage numerous times. More than I could count. She always wanted to be married before 30. So that we could have children right away, but that didn't happen. So I knew then that she may have been in a little rush. She kept saying that I was perfect for her and for marriage because I was young in my prime, if you will. The whole time, this woman was really just using me for my youth, like a blood-sucking creature. And when that hit, I felt beyond disgusted. Despite our conversations, I knew that I wasn't ready for marriage or children. But to make her happy, I contributed to her rants and made her feel as if I'd be there for what she needed. Time continued to pass by and I couldn't stand to stay with her for much longer. I took her out to dinner for the first time publicly. And as I type this, I now realize just how strange this also sounds. She knew automatically that it had to be some sort of surprise that I was planning because, as I stated earlier, she was usually the leader, and if I did initiate date nights, it would be in the comfort of our homes. It took a little persuading. However, when the night came for us to go to dinner, she was all dolled up. I noticed a new color on her fingernails, so that told me that she already had an idea of what I was planning to do. I played along for the entire night, behaving as I normally would, and acting as if nothing was wrong. I had to pretend that everything she didn't disgust me, from the way she ate to the way she spoke the things I'd previously loved about her. I couldn't stand any longer. She ate all of her desserts carefully, as if expecting to get a ring in one of them. It was pathetic to watch it. So pathetic that I held in my laughter all throughout. Finally, at the end of the dinner, I pulled out the box she'd been expecting. But instead of a ring, there was a small remote. Holly looked confused, but before she could ask me anything, the manager, per our agreement, brought out the mini projector I had given him. Holly covered her face as I stood, hiding her grin under it. She had no idea what I had in store for her. I thanked the manager while giving him his payment and stood next to the makeshift sheet screen. They had rolled out. Everyone stared at me, letting out an hallway as a picture of Holly and I showed up on the screen. I started off with a small speech about how we met, how my whole life had been going since we'd been together, and Holly seemed to swoon in her seat, mouthing, "And I love you." I remembered it vividly because of the mass of it gave me. I swear a shiver ran up my spine. Out of all my disgust, I blew a kiss back at her, holding back my smirk. Holly couldn't see through my facade, and I needed to keep it that way to make sure that she didn't suspect anything. I continued talking, showing various pictures of us, feeding the grin on her face. It brought me so much joy to know that I was going to be the one to humiliate her. When I got the crowd and Holly convinced enough that I was going to propose, I asked her to come up to join me. She stood quickly from her chair, prancing over in her heels and tucking herself underneath my arms. I can still see her wiping tears of joy out of her eyes, and I thought to myself that she would really let me marry her, knowing that she loved someone else. I would have been getting cheated on throughout our marriage, and I wouldn't know a thing. Both of our backs were turned against the projector screen. Everyone clapped as I introduced my gorgeous girlfriend, and she soaked it all in. That's when I decided that it was time. I clicked the button again, and a screenshot of her and the other guy popped up, zoomed in, and was completely readable. It was comical, the way the crowd's happy faces fell and their eyes focused on her. Holly still hadn't realized anything, so filled with herself. But it wouldn't be long till she realized, because the silence became deafening. I switched to another screenshot that showed a few messages and some blurred-out pictures, but the gasp the crowd let out told me that they got the idea. That was the moment that Holly's smile dwindled, and she turned around to get a glimpse of what they were looking at. It was pure satisfaction and pleasure for me when realization dawned on her face. Her mouth dropped open and she tensed up under me. Holly ripped herself from my grip and went to stand in front of the projector. Her eyes filled with tears. She begged me to take down the screenshots to let her explain everything. By then, the crowd had their phones up, shaking their heads in disappointment. I almost felt sorry for her and gave in. After all, she was humiliated, and that was the plan. Right? Wrong. No amount of crying and pleading could have made me forget what Holly did. And the fact that she would have gone along with the engagement showed how little she saw me as a person, but an object that she could use to pursue her dreams. So I didn't take it down when she pleaded. I gave the audience the show, silently flicking through all the dirty things she had sent. I wasn't going to make a fool of myself by going back and forth with her. So I turned toward the crowd and addressed them instead. I let them know our age differences and just how badly I felt manipulated through the course of her actions. Holly stood beside me dumbfounded because she knew as much as she wanted to get out of this. Nothing I said was a lie. She gaslighted me our entire relationship, and she would have trapped me. Had I not gone through her phone? Of course, there were some women of her kind trying to stick up for her in the crowd, but the rest of the customers shut them down for me. It was then that I knew they sympathized with me. She begged and begged for me to stop, practically sobbing. And that's when I turned it. I had done enough damage, and now she'd be left to deal with the repercussions. I told her that I hope she gets the man she wants before leaving. I pretended that I was cool, calm and collected. That the situation wasn't much of a bother to me and that I was just moving on with my life. But the reality was I crashed at one of my friends after getting sloppy drunk in his kitchen. It hurts to admit that I also cried a bit, and he claimed, although I don't believe that much, that I was inconsolable. I think in that moment it had truly dawned on me what she'd done, and that we were pretty much over. I thought I'd found someone who'd make my life easier in the best ways, who I'd share myself with, just to find out the entire time she was using me. I would be a psychopath not to be even the slightest bit damaged after that. Like a band-aid to my wound, though, the videos went viral. In the small town that we stayed in, naturally. It was kind of a situation where everyone was familiar with everyone. So when news spread, it spreaded quickly. For a long while, Holly was being used as memes, think pieces, podcast content. You name it. At least I wouldn't be the only one drowning in humiliation. I felt bad at one point, not for what I did, but because people dragged it on for so long. Months passed by, and I still saw an occasional meme of her crying in front of the projector. Still, those were the consequences of her actions, and I refused to be manipulated by her for any second longer. She did reach out a few times after the incident, wanting to explain or to meet up. But I think at that point in my life, I was still buffered and tired. I didn't want anything to do with her, so I politely declined. My parent also used every moment to say "I told you so." So frankly, I wasn't looking forward to hearing that again anytime soon. Holly had really done a number, and all of us, nevertheless, I decided to move on with my life. I couldn't sulk forever. And there were so many better things ahead, is what I told myself to get through. I focused on my career and moved into a bigger apartment. I still see women from time to time, but it's never a serious thing as to whether I'll date again. I won't downright say no because I don't know what the future holds. Although there's no way I'd get back in the game anytime soon. But what I will say is there's no way I'm putting that much effort into revenge ever again. I look back on the energy I exerted and sometimes I cringe. I was a grown man. There was no reason for me to go that far. Especially after I stated earlier that I wasn't a hyper-masculine toxic man. Moving forward, I'll also take red flags at face value and not turn a blind eye just because the woman is beautiful and dominant. Would I date another older woman again? Hell, yeah. Maybe I just go through her phone first. The biggest lesson from this story is, of course, to subscribe to my channel as well as like and comment your opinion under the video. Everything helps for the algorithm.